Hey, what's happening? Come with me. Let's check this out.
Hey, what's happening? Today we're going to go to a little town called Vaughn, central Victoria. Once I've been around Vaughn, I want to go to another little town. It's neighbouring property. This little town's called Irish Town, followed by another little town called Friars Town. They're all relative to each other. They're all part of a golden triangle in central Victoria. I know roughly what's there. I've been there many years ago. There's some cool stuff to see. I really want to share it with you guys. If you're into the old cemetery thing, old gold digging areas, I don't know what we're going to find, but what I can tell you is what's out there is pretty cool. Let's get after it. Now arrived at the Vaughn Cemetery. This little cemetery was established in 1860. The first known grave was the grave of a little girl called Margaret Jane Stanley. She was 2 years and 7 months old when she was put to rest here. I don't know where she's buried in here, but we're going to go for a walk and see if we can find her. Let's go. So many unmarked graves, just lumps of dirt. Probably 150 years old. Literally just tufts of dirt. All unmarked. And then we got this little guy, Dennis L. Furlong. Little guy was 1.5 years old. Didn't even get a shot at it. Was put here in 1943. 1943. Here's another one of those big family graves that it takes a little bit to get your head around, and I think I've figured it out. Samuel and Catherine Williams, obviously they were married. They've laid most of their children to rest here together, with the exception of William. But first of all, there was Sarah in 1867. She was 1 year old, followed by Samuel in 1881. He was 4 years old. 1889 saw Emily and Albert both buried here. Emily was 1.5 years old. Albert was 8 months old. Didn't even stand a chance, whatever was happening in their lives then. 1893 saw young Richard buried. He was 13 years old. The following year, Samuel himself was laid to rest here in 1894. Catherine had buried all these people, including her husband now. She managed to keep William. He was alive until the year 1900. He passed away at the age of 31 years old. He was laid to rest here. Catherine, 1913, 75 years old. 13 years after William, she was also laid to rest here. What a story. Wow. What a story. What a story. A lot of people laid to rest in here. What a story. What a sad time. I feel real bad for Catherine. What a life. Wow. So I've just been talking to Colin. He's one of the caretakers here at the Vaughn Cemetery. And I asked him about where the grave of little Margaret might be. I think we need to find it. His records state that as soon as you get in the gate, turn left, there was a shed there up until about 10 years ago. She was buried beside the shed. So this is all I've got to go by. There's your entrance gate. I'm going to come in and turn left. We can see the foundation of where there was some sort of a structure. A little bit of corrugated iron on the ground over here. First plot right here is in the family name Rodder. I believe little Margaret is going to be buried somewhere around here. She was number one. So an interesting tale of the cemetery here is back in the day, Vaughn was swamped. There was 15,000 people. That's more people than the population of Castlemaine to this day. 15,000 people swamped on the township of Vaughn in search of gold. Naturally, death was pretty rampant. There was a lot of cholera, poisonous water. The water supply was not good. Generally, it attacked the children the most, spread like wildfire, wiped out so many. But the cemetery itself was naturally protected. It's illegal to prospect here. It was always been and always has been illegal to frolic for gold, look for gold, search for gold, dig for gold. It's a sacred burial ground, and they were always regarded that way. A couple of miners thought it would be a good idea to not dig in the cemetery, but we'll dig on the other side of the fence line. The gold diggings, the natural gold diggings, do come very close to the perimeter of this cemetery. These guys thought they'd push the boundaries, dig under the fence and into the cemetery. Lo and behold, hole caves in. They need to be rescued. In the end, it was a recovery. It wasn't a rescue, it was a body recovery. They'd been killed in the collapse. So the guys that actually dug down in the hole here, this is beyond the perimeter, the fence line of the cemetery. There is some old pickets remaining still down here. You probably can't see them, but they're there. They dug down on the boundary, tunneled all the way down here, which was illegal, so they're tunnelling their way down along here. They've only made it in about this far, which is pretty far really. It's probably 25 metres. And it's this section of land here that's caved in on them and subsequently killed them. We're a bit unsure as to whether the recovery was from that way in this way to try and save them, or whether they just dug down here to recover the bodies, but either way they were recovered, and we're pretty sure one was definitely killed, unsure on whether there was two. But this is where it's happened. How's that? Those two guys killed in a mine collapse, recovered, thrown back over the fence and reburied. That blows me away. How's that even happen? Wow. It would have been horse and cart recovery too. Like, there's no cars. You didn't have big SUVs and cranes and extraction equipment, bobcats, excavators like now. Doing it with ropes and horse and cart and basic hand tools. Probably had a bit of dynamite. Wow. Wow. This is the Chinese section. It's not very big, although it would have been at one point. What actually happened, so I'm told over the years, is that a lot of the Chinese families would actually exhume the graves and relocate them back home to China. This happened way after their deaths. Years later, there's not many originals. I'm told that the stones are like a reproduction of where the graves were. Although they look like they're graves, they've been exhumed. There's not many Chinese left here at rest. However, up the back, there are 2 original headstones. This one here is original, which is in quite bad condition. There's no fonts on it. I can't really read any of it. And then the remaining one is right here near the edge of the creek. You can see the Chinese characters on it. I'm not sure if you can read it. That's it. That's what it is. If you can read Chinese, hit me up in the comments section. I'd be curious to know what that says. It's very close to the edge of the creek. My suspicion is it's going to end up eventually in the creek. Next time they get a big wash, that 1 in 100-year flood. Wow. Not a very big section, but I'm told once upon a time this section would have been massive. And it's pretty amazing that they care enough to look up their ancestors and come all the way back out here to Australia to exhume a grave and take it home. I guess that's their right, they can do that, but it just seems really full on to me to dig up some ancestor from 100 years ago or 80 years ago and bring them back home. Is what it is. The words that I was actually looking for here is the repatriation of bones. And this evolved out of a desire for the Chinese to have the bodies returned to their ancestral home for 2 primary purposes: the performance of time-honoured cultural rituals and to be buried in China's soil near their ancestors. So we've got one lone grave right up the back here by itself, literally in the middle of nowhere. Right up the back. And it's another sizable one. Charlotte, she was the wife of Andrew, and he laid her to rest in 1870. She was only 37 years old. Their son Thomas, he was accidentally killed in 1880, the same year. No, 10 years later. He was 24. 24, accidentally killed. Andrew himself gets put in here, 1886, he was 63. Well, he got a bit more time to hang out compared to his wife, Charlotte. She was like 37. That's young, man. Wow, what a story. Cemeteries have caretakers, and there was a long-time caretaker of this place. I'm not going to mention names, but the lady that we're talking about used to come, mow grass, take care of the place. That's her job, and she was obviously pretty passionate about doing that. This particular day, she'd moved some of the nameplates in the soil. So there's little metal nameplates. They're obviously in the way. They pull them out to mow them. They mark where they go. They put them back. That's the deal. That's how they do it, right? It's the most efficient, effective way of doing it. Well, this particular day, for whatever reason, she had removed some of the nameplates, or a lot of the nameplates, to mow. She had gone home for whatever reason, and she was killed. She was killed, the story goes, going to her letterbox. Excuse me. Dirt bikes in the bush. Yeah, she was killed. So that kind of left a bit of a dent in the markings of where the graves actually are. It's just another piece of the puzzle in the Vaughn Cemetery. It's a cool part of the story, but it's an unfortunate part of the story because little dents like this along the way definitely kill and lose the history. As time goes by, the history gets more and more washed out, the stories get regenerated into something else. And that's part of this story here. It's a pretty cool one. How's this little old gem? Don't know how safe it is. I don't weigh much. I think everything's going to be just lovely. Yikes. Are you serious? Wow. How about that? I would say one more decent flood. A decent flood would probably push this thing over. That's cool. It's probably 120 years old. Welcome to the heart of Vaughn. This is it. We're gonna look around the outskirts of Vaughn a little bit, but this is the main, what I can see, the main centre of Vaughn, and probably one of the coolest buildings right here. I can't tell you much more about it because there's nothing written on it and there's no one around. Main epicenter of the township of Vaughn, right here. This is it. It's noted as a bank. The Bank of Victoria, 1853. Is that really all that's left in the main street of Vaughn? No school, no post office, a cemetery, a very small, very tidy, but very small centre of town. Wow. Talk about forgotten about. Funny little tracks to get down to some of these places. I opted not to drive down here. I probably could have. Just felt a bit rude. I think this house is abandoned anyway. It doesn't look very lived in. Might be some gas bottles there, but it's pretty ran down. Chinese cemetery. Up on top of the hill, just outside of town. Well, if you call Vaughn a town. There's not much here, but it's still worth a look. 1855 to 1859, European and Chinese pioneers. They rest here. The Chinese normally face a certain way, or maybe that's the Japanese. I'm not sure. I need educating there. I'm told that there's people buried everywhere here. Yeah, okay, we're standing on top of a hill. It's listed as the Chinese burial ground, but all the hilltops in this district were used as plots to bury the dead during the mining periods. 15,000 people, a lot of sickness. It's probably not surprising, but you can see a lot of sunken marks in a lot of the tracks and trails. Are they all graves? Maybe, maybe not. But nonetheless, there's a lot of people unaccounted for in this district that were once diggers and miners of the area. So this is Vaughn Springs. I don't drink spring water. It's popular. People like it. It's a pretty little area. Check it. The creek's not spring water. The spring comes from the depths across the road. Let's check it out. This is the spring. This is where people would hang out, pump water, drink it. It's not much to see. It's the original spring. Nope. It's hard to imagine 15,000 people swarming on this district. Township of Vaughn's just over here. There's not much there, like I keep saying township. It's more like a reference point, let's call it. Township of Vaughn's over there. And this valley would have been swamped with diggers scrounging for gold. 15,000 of them. It's pretty uncomprehendable. The countryside would have looked much different. A lot less trees, I would have thought. More dirt, less trees. The ground everywhere here is pretty... It's just got that quartzy look about it. So the year's 1853. And a gold rush began. Down this very road. New Year Flat Road. And the place we're heading to is called New Year Flat. There's a creek down here. Gold was discovered on New Year's Day. How ironic, they've called the road New Year Flat. New Year's Day in 1853. Soon after, we had no less than 15,000 people scurry into this district in the hunt for the riches, which probably brought a lot of misery to most. Let's check it out. So the other end of the road was a bust. It pretty much dead ends. It backs up onto some private property with a bit of a fork in the road. But from what I can gather, it was over here somewhere. There's a creek running through here. And this is where the gold was first found. This very spot's where everybody flocked. Somewhere near here they built a pub called the Shamrock Pub. Would have been called a hotel back then, the Shamrock Hotel. And there's stories of what was described as wild men hang out there. You could imagine how rough and gruff some of them miners, they would have been as tough as nails. You could imagine the sorts of fellas that'd be looking for a drink at the end of a day, scrounging around in a black tunnel trying to find gold. This is all that's left. There's really not much to see, and it appears to all be private property. Welcome to Irish Town. Population of 16 people. You can probably see where the 16 people live right here in this image. Really not what I expected. I mean, it's super pretty out here. It looks lovely, but not much going on. That intrigues me. It's pretty old school and it looks pretty empty. You can even get a puppet show. Yep. Unreal. Let's go. This thing would have been a masterpiece back in the day. Most people were probably sleeping in a damn tent. Cut into the back of a hill a little bit. But that's probably not even the coolest thing. In the backyard, we've got some ruins. A little bit of a doorway here. I don't know whether this would have been the Shamrock pub. No one can tell me. But it's looking like it could have been. I mean, it's got like a cellar. It's got everything that I would have been looking for in a hotel back in the day. Plenty of room, cellar, multiple entrance, exit. Let's scoot around there and see what's down there. Oh dude, we've even got a fireplace. Holy dooly. That is wild. Wild. Wow. Little secret hole or a little trenchy thing in the middle. I don't know what that might be. Something to do with the water maybe. Might have been a toilet. I don't know. That's crazy. Look at that. Wow. Unreal. What a view. There was a church built in 1865 on New Year's Flat Road. It was also demolished in 1956. I think I've got my years and dates right on that, so we don't get to see any remnants of it. This church here is the first one that I've come across. Let's check it out. First established in 1861, used until 1971, appears to be privately owned. It's quite a iconic looking Australian gold rush sort of time church. They sort of all look like this to a degree. They've all got their little character, but this is a good one. Privately owned, so somebody's taking care of it. Hats off to them for that. They say if you've seen one cemetery, you've seen them all. Well, not really. They're all a little different. The Friarstown Cemetery is really in the bush, like it's up a dirt track. I'm not saying you can't get to it, like you can always get to it, but you know, dirt track, bit rough, bit rugged. Not really super duperly cared for. I wouldn't say it's crazy overgrown or whatever, but it's not really cared for. The old section up the back, what you see is what it is. Probably not going to cruise around here for too long. The biggest monument is this guy standing up over here. Is what it is. Newest section over there, probably from the 60s onwards. older section naturally around here. Run of the mill, let's just pick one. 1879, 1895. You get the gist. Nathaniel and Marianne Lannon. They buried their little 1-year-old here. And then that was in 1867. 1886, they buried another daughter here. She was 14 and a half years old. No sign of the parents being buried here though. Buried their children alone, and then they're unaccounted for. That's another wild, sad story. This is it, High Street, the centre of Friarstown. The post office closed in 1975. The courthouse closed way before that in 1930. Not much left here. Pretty little town. You'll probably never pass through it unless you mean to. This is High Street. One of the cool buildings left. Let's check it. It's the main junction in the centre of town. What you see is what there is. There's a really cool little cottage back here. I just want to show you. Some of this stuff here is cool too. Would have been there for 150 years. This cottage down the road, I'm not sure if it's lived in. Some of them just have a, I don't know, it's almost like they grab you and speak to you or something. Check this thing out. There's 2 of them. Super cool. Pretty little street. Now you've seen it all. Off to find something else. I'm gonna head to Castlemaine, so on the way, don't know what we'll find, but I'll be looking for something. Some of the Goldfields diggings got pretty wild. Not everybody was there with a pick and shovel. Some guys had some big coin, chucked a lot of dollars at trying to get the gold, and dug some big holes. This is not one of the biggest ones, but I did just come across this. The shafts are generally pretty unstable. I'm not here to preach to you, but you probably shouldn't be fiddling around too close to the edges. They will swallow you up. They're deep holes. They're not capped off too good. Here's a good example of one right here. Look at the dirt that they pulled out of that mama. Pretty big mullock heap. Considering it's a 150-year-old mullock heap, imagine how much it would have dissipated over the years, and people have been here digging it out, you know, filtering through it for slate, or probably thinking that they're going to find more gold out of it. Probably did find more gold out of it. There's tailings in there that have gold in it. But yeah, it's that's wild. That is wild. Lots of scroungings around the outskirts too, so the main guys would have been here with their big fancy poppet head up in the air, you know, and the big wheel thing, like ropes and whatever going down. And then the poorer guys would have been scrounging around the outsides, hoping to hand dig a little hole and find something. But the whole land side has just been turned totally upside down. There's not a flat section of dirt left. They're all the same, all the goldfields throughout central Victoria. They all look like this. You could say if you've seen one, you've seen them all. They're all a little different, but basically that's how they look. You can imagine how frantic they would have been back in the day, scrounging to get gold, or they're probably literally going to starve to death. There's no plane to save your ass and get you out of here. There's no alternative. It's wild to think about right here. This building's called the Duke of Cornwall. It's an engine house. It was built in 1869 for the Australian United Gold Mining Company. That's pretty wild. 1869, let's take a closer look. They seem pretty concerned about trespassers. Everybody's worried they're going to get sued nowadays, I think. What a superb old building. Kind of makes me wonder how they even build a chimney that big. Look at the size of that thing. That's way up there. How'd they even scaffold up that high back then to do all that? That's crazy. I remember coming past here many years ago. Have a listen to you. Not even old, mate. But anyway, a couple of years ago I came past here and this place, I don't reckon it was even fenced off. I don't reckon it was, yeah, there was no fence here at all. And funny enough, the whole place was like a ruin, but now it's like somebody's bought it. And to me it looks like they've kind of been chipping away at it, trying to fix it up. And they've done a pretty cool job. It's cool, but I don't know why. But it was a lot worse than this. I remember it being worse than this, so they have. They've definitely, somebody's definitely been at it, cleaned it up. It's cool to see. I don't know what you do with it though. What are you going to do with it? Whatever. Talking before about graves in the middle of nowhere. This one literally is in the middle of nowhere. I'm going to try and find a little bit more out about it. Let's check this out, right? This is what we got. Elizabeth S. Scott. She died in 1856. She was 53. And her daughter, she went in there, well, she was there first. She was 15, 1855, so they must have buried Fanny, the daughter, first. I don't know, people come here. Like, people actually come here, it's a thing. You know, there must be a bit more of a story to it. Maybe I should look into that. Check it. Sole grave. Single grave in the middle of nowhere. Let me talk about wild. I reckon that's pretty wild. Just out here in the Australian bush. That's crazy. So I mentioned earlier about a poppet head. If you don't know what it is, I'm going to show you. I reckon they're pretty cool. We're actually at the remains of a mining site, a massive, major operation mining site. I don't believe it's running anymore. I'm pretty sure it's all deserted and abandoned and whatever. But the poppet head that remains is wild. The whole mining site, I think, shut down, long shut down. There's a bit of a look through the fence. pretty desolate. Not much going on. It's a massive facility. Let's get going up the track. I'll show you some more cool stuff. Alright, it was a bit of a walk to get here. No big deal. Check this. Climb up here. Check this. That is a poppet head. And the wheel up the top is driven by a couple of cables to an engine house. Cables spin around the wheel at the top, which lifts the buckets up and down the shaft. Whatever, that's a simple-minded version of it, but that's basically what it does. So the shaft is at the bottom of the poppet head. I don't know how deep this one is. I might try and find out and I'll add it later. The shaft itself was first sunk in 1871. By the 1890s it was 400 feet deep. In the 1930s the shaft was reopened and it became Victoria's premier producing gold mine for about 30 years, yielding some 341,000 ounces of gold. The last time it was ran was in the 80s. I'm just going to add this into the short series here. This is the Garfield water wheel. I think it's pretty cool. I wanted to share it with you guys. It's obviously ancient. There's some cool pictures of how it used to look. It was part of a stamping battery set up on the outskirts of Castlemaine, so I'm about a 20-minute drive from where we've been and where we've been touring around. The remains of what we see here is pretty wild. Let's just get a look at this. Check it. So the wheel itself was 72 feet in diameter. It had 220 buckets on it. Each bucket capacity was 5 gallons. It was built in 1887. They're pretty clever, them old buggers back then. 1887. It's just a little bit of an artist's impression of how the wheel sort of is today and what was actually there back in the day. Bit of a ghostly image of a couple of guys standing up there on the remains of what it now is. The side of it's scalloped out down in there. Here's about a shot of how it was actually operated. The water's channeled from way elsewhere into the wheel, which gives it its momentum and powers up whatever they got going on in this wheelhouse. The only thing that separates then and now is time, which is pretty cool to marvel about. So put simply, what the wheel actually did was it was ran, they'd use channeling, a basic channeling system to divert water from a dam that was elsewhere up mountain. Divert water to the wheel. Obviously the wheel would turn. With that would turn some shafts. The shafts would run stamping batteries, gold mining gear, anything to earn $1, I would have guessed. But that was their method of generating power rather than using coal or conventional methods. It was just as simple as channeling water to a wheel and using the momentum of those shafts to drive all their gear to run the mines. It's pretty crazy engineering. And there's no sign of any creek anywhere near here, so they've channeled the water from a long way away. Like, this is sort of on the edge of a hill, so there's probably dams way back in the bush, way back over this way somewhere. There'd be dams that channel water to this wheel. That's crazy. It's funny to ponder on the guys that would have stood here and marvelled on it and built it and profited from it. Pretty much sums up those little towns, those little early gold mining towns. probably don't bring much from it either. I mean, the cemeteries were cool. A couple of cool old buildings. I guess if the walls could talk, there'd be a lot of stories, but I brought the best to you that I probably could on such a small scale topic. Maybe in the comments section below somebody might reach out with some more information. We might be able to go back and fill in a few blanks. There was a lot of stuff. We couldn't find the Shamrock Hotel and couldn't find where the post office was in Vaughn itself. There's a few things unanswered. It is what it is for now. Cheers. Till the next one.